Hi guys, I think we were talking about Charles Spearman where we left off. So let's pick up there. And we had a technical glitch. I recorded the second half of this part without it actually recording. So here we are. We're going to do it again. And from factor analysis, what we said is, hey, what we're measuring may not be just one thing. We may be measuring more than one thing at a given time. And that is in terms of what factors are we looking at. And Spearman kind of developed this idea, then there's intelligence tests do tell us about a person's general intelligence. He said, I'm going to call that G because he was like an awesomely creative guy in that respect. But he said, you know, G will explain the person's score on this test compared to that test compared to that test. Their general intelligence would be consistent across all three tests. But he said the tests are written differently, so the test will also demonstrate differences in scores, but those are attributable to the specific abilities, and he called that S. So he said ultimately a person's score on any test is a combination of their general ability and their specific abilities that are consistent with that test. Now, Spearman was kind of different. Remember, Binet said that intelligence could be nurtured, essentially improved. Well, Spearman said, no, it's basically what you got is what you got. That's it. So it's rankable, it's genetically based, and it's minimally alterable. And this is consistent with kind of a position that people who engage in eugenics in the United States from 1910 to 1920 all the way up to the 50s said, if you want smart people, then you better breed smart people with other smart people. That if you allow breeding to just be random, then what we're going to see is a decrease in ability. And notice that the Nazis picked up on this in the 1930s. They really liked the idea of a super race that was genetically determined, and the Nazis tightly controlled breeding. Where did they learn this? Well, they actually learned this from the Americans, and we had in the 1920s through the 1950s a program of sterilizing people who fell below a certain level on, let's say, the IQ scale. That is, if people, using the old terms, were imbeciles, idiots, or morons, then the state could petition to sterilize them so that they weren't diminishing the gene pool, so to speak, adding a lack of intelligence as a quality in the population. These are ugly times based on ugly theory that really isn't supported in the empirical view that we take now. Okay, that's kind of a downer. Let's shift to something that's kind of more historically interesting. Let's look at this guy. He looks to me like you know, kind of a almost a silent movies type actor. You know, very, very charming in his roguish style there. And this is Raymond Cattell, and guess who he is? He's a student of Spearman's. And this is the story. Spearman on the previous slide, big professor, has a graduate student. Cattell learns everything that Spearman knows and then advances it a little further. He modified Spearman's intelligence theory, and basically what he went after was G. And he said, you know, this G thing, I dig G, but I don't think G is a single thing. I think G is two things. So he's making his contribution, his extension. And he said G is in part fluid intelligence, and that's the ability to find new meaning, to find meaning in confusion, right, and solve new problems. What does that sound like? Creativity, and this is important because this is going to spawn kind of the interest in creativity for a lot of people as well. Now, the other part of G is crystallized intelligence, and this is typically what would be tested on an intelligence test, is your ability to use your skills, knowledge, and experience in kind of a pre-existing way. So there you go. What we're doing is making the transition slowly from, hey, I'm going to measure this, and I'm going to call it intelligence, to people saying, wow, what is intelligence? And how does that relate to the tests we've been given? And now we're going to go like really theoretical. When we look at cognitive psychologists coming out of the 50s and beyond, looking at intelligence theoretically. And so ideally, theory is going to come first. It's going to generate hypotheses, and we're going to operationalize those hypotheses then through empirical research. So the testing comes last rather than first. So now we're going to flip the story around, and Sternberg, right, and there's Sternberg, and Gardner are going to come at us, and they're going to say, look, let's theorize about intelligence and we can test it later. So Sternberg's triarchic theory And Sternberg is from Harvard, and this is amazes me. He says, practical intelligence. What the hell is practical intelligence? He said, well, intelligence is 3 components, and practical intelligence might be street smarts. This is how to solve real-world problems, right? Isn't that cool? Guy from Harvard talking about people in my neighborhood who know how to negotiate the neighborhood and get things done here as street smarts, practical intelligence. And then there's logical reasoning. And logical reasoning, of course, is what the intelligence tests have been testing all along, math, vocabulary, etc. And then experiential intelligence, this is Sternberg's kind of big area, is he's a leading researcher on creativity. So how do we, in fact, what constitutes creativity? Why are some people more creative than others? What facilitates creativity? So notice a huge theoretical stance that can lead to practical solutions to practical problems. So Sternberg comes at us with 3. Gardner hits us a little harder with 7. Count them, 7. And now the world is really opening up to kind of thinking that we're all kind of special in our own way. And I know that's a cliche, but when you expand to multiple intelligences, you begin to allow for this. Someone might have high linguistic intelligence. They're very facile with language, right? Vocabulary, writing. Others might excel in logical, mathematical intelligence, but not so much another type of intelligence. Spatial intelligence, maybe an architect, right, has the ability to see things in their mind. What about musical intelligence? It's completely different maybe than these other types of intelligence. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence. So athletes have this special type of intelligence. Dancers can do things that other people can't do as well, right? A surgeon is able to be very precise with their motor movements, and that would be kinesthetic intelligence. And then the last 2, interpersonal and intrapersonal, kind of have been combined now when we get to the 1980s and 1990s into emotional intelligence. With interpersonal being understanding how to relate to others, right, and intrapersonal how to access aspects of the self, which are both components of what's called emotional intelligence. So the idea of intelligence has expanded notably in the last 60 or 70 years, right? And probably for the good of all of us. Now, cultural definitions of intelligence. Culture specific. What's intelligent in one culture might not be considered intelligent in another culture. I think of Marilyn Brewer, my advisor. She went with Donald Campbell to Africa to study how different African tribes perceived other African tribes, right? And what did they find? Well, that our culture appreciates quick responses. That is, how fast you come up with an answer. But maybe in Africa, if you're sitting down with a tribal elder, they want to get to know you before they talk too much, and they might ask you a question. And for many of us Westerners, I would want to impress them. You ask me a question, man, bam, I'm going to hit you with that answer right here and now, super fast. And the guy looks at me like I'm an idiot. Why does he believe I'm an idiot? Because he believes it was an important question, and he believes important questions take thoughtful consideration before one answers. So the stupid thing to do would be to answer quickly. The intelligent thing to do would be to pause for a while and contemplate one's answer before they share it, right? So you could be very intelligent but appear unintelligent depending on how a culture conceptualizes what it is to be intelligent, right? Some cultures say wisdom over the lifespan, and we see this, in Japan. That is, the eldest person in the family might be considered the wisest and should be consulted for significant problems. And other cultures might value hard work, acceptance, and respect. That is, hey, this is your place in life. It's not likely to change. This is your status. The smart thing to do is to work hard and accept that this is your position, and not try to row upstream or fight against it. Now, what about the relationship of motivation to intelligence, right? If we take a sample, and this study took a sample of 200 business people and compared the top 100 most successful to the lower successful 100, and they tried to understand what separates these. And IQ was not a predictor on who would be in the top 100 or the lower 100. Motivation was the predictor in this sample. So working hard, right, could provide more benefits than simply being intelligent. Motivation to work hard at intellectual tasks notice how we combine these two ideas, differs as a function of culture. In Japan, right, working hard at academic tasks is highly prized, and some Japanese students, they finish high school all week long, and what do they do on the weekend? They go to a second school to give them a leg up in the weekly school. How many of you would pay to go to a second school to improve your performance in the first school? That's a very strange idea to Americans, and they're not likely to engage in it. So it can be a function of culture. American children are as knowledgeable as Asian children on general skills, but notice that Asian children, and this can be Middle Asia to East Asia, often kick our butts on SATs, GREs, and other scores because the expectation to perform on these is greater for them than it might be for Western children. Now, are IQ tests racially or culturally biased? Probably. Social class can affect your vocabulary. That is, and education level is tied to social class quite often. Not a matter of intelligence, but a matter of experience. The concept of intelligence, as we suggested, differs in culture. Poverty can affect learning opportunities. You know, when I was a kid, my dad gave me, for my birthday or Christmas, maybe a combined, because my birthday is December 20th, so I often got combined gifts, right? He gave me a set of encyclopedias, and that was freaking awesome. Now notice this has to be kind of a middle or higher class phenomenon for someone to be able to afford a set of encyclopedias. But encyclopedias, when I was a kid, right, in 1964 and 1965, encyclopedias were at the library and that was it. So if you had your own set of encyclopedias, man, you could really get a leg up on general knowledge because you had that resource. That wasn't necessarily available to poorer children, right? So social class, poverty can affect learning outcomes that in a way that has nothing to do with intelligence. So let's talk about your first homework assignment, not discussion board, but this will be an assignment you submit. What is intelligence? And you're going to answer these questions. Is it a single construct or multiple constructs? Based on your reading, based on the lecture, what the hell do you think? And you're going to support your ideas on this. Right? You'll work in pairs on this. If I think that's the way I got it set up. What do you believe that it means to be intelligent as opposed to average or stupid? And I know that's a nasty question because nobody likes to call people stupid necessarily, but we do classify people based on our impressions of their intelligence. Where does that classification come from for you? So I want you to explain that to me. How would you measure intelligence? And then give me 3 examples. So if you were in charge of measuring intelligence, how would you do it? And let's be concrete about this. Give me honest to God examples of like test questions. And then, see, for number 4 then is building off of number 3, what category of intelligence do the items in number 3 represent? And did you tap into multiple categories or a single category, or does a single item maybe tap into multiple categories? What I'm looking for is not a right or wrong answer, but the rationale that you use to explain your answers. And then there's some more questions coming up here. What are the 3 environmental cultural factors that would lead to higher scores on your measures? So let's investigate your possible measures for bias, the potential bias, right? And what 3 environmental cultural factors would lead to lower scores on your measures? So you try to imagine the people who are taking your test and how they might be advantaged or disadvantaged, right? And then what person category membership would score most highly based on your measures supported by your theory? And I don't want to go to the downside of this, who would score more poorly, but what class of people, what category of people might get an advantage based on the construction, the design of your measures? Okay? And that's it. So, do you have any questions? And if you have any questions, what are you going to do? Okay, you're going to come to office hours or you're going to come to the Zoom session. You're going to ask those questions so we can all learn from each other. And I want to thank you guys. You have a good day.